Hi and welcome to Leitrim Daily. You're listening to episode number 108 of the podcast. Today it's Sunday and it's Kiss My Arts. I'm your host, Órla McNabola. Next weekend, both Fenagh and Drumkeerin will see the first ever book launch of none other than Mr. Andy Redican. Now, Andy is originally a Fenagh man, but he moved to Drumkeerin over 50 years ago. Let me tell you, he's not a blow-in there anymore. He got stuck in Drumkeerin with regards to community development. You'll hear him talking about his involvement with the credit union, with local drama events and local GAA, to name just but a few. And of course, we can't forget at the moment, Andy is the president of the Leitrim County Board. The book he has coming out, it's called Deeply Rooted. It's a collection of 16 beautiful, precious stories of fiction, and no doubt they'll transport the reader straight back to 1940s, 1950s Ireland. They're happy, lighthearted stories, and the readers will be able to identify with the characters and also with the settings because they're set in Leitrim, Longford and in London. So Andy is here to tell me all about the ins and outs of his wheel of life and the writing of his first ever book. Andy, welcome along.
Thank you very much, Órla.
Andy, you've just written your first book. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I've just written my first book, I suppose. It was coming a while. I have 15 grandchildren and 4 of them are in England, and I came to the conclusion at one time that those 4 would know nothing about their grandparents or their great-grandparents. So I started off writing one story that would capture life in way back in the 1940s and the 1950s. So as I was writing the story, I decided that I should write fiction because I think it would be more dramatic for the reader. And I suppose the fact that I've been writing drama and involved in drama meant that I would have a better grasp of writing a dialogue and characterization, putting them all together. So I started off with my first one, and my first story was Forked Lightning, based on a story that one time was told to me by my father.
And that's part of the collection coming out called Deeply Rooted.
Yeah, Deeply Rooted. Well, as the title would suggest, Deeply Rooted would be that the stories are deeply rooted in my life. My life in Fenagh, where I grew up, my life sometimes working in England, and I suppose my life in Leitrim. All of those had a major influence on my writing and my thoughts, and I started off that way. The first story, of course, in the book is about myself. I wrote my wheel of life, and I suppose maybe I shouldn't have written it anyway. Maybe my family mightn't be too happy because it does capture my life where I started in Fenagh and then went on to St. Bell's and Longford. I got a scholarship to do agricultural science in Galway in the university, and I had to do physics and chemistry, which I'd never seen. So I had 3 unhappy years trying to get exams, and I threw the lot there and went to London. So my wheel of life, I go along and I go from that to, I went from London to Cork, where I studied and got a degree in arts, English, history and geography, and came back to Drumkeerin in 1967, started teaching there. What really brought my wheel of life around to I suppose the full circle would be that 2 years ago I directed a play in Fenagh, my home place, where they had formed the Fenagh Drama Troupe. So I got great satisfaction over doing that. I was back at home. I suppose I never left Fenagh, so in my mind I never did, but I really have to say that I went to Drumkeerin and I found the Drumkeerin people extremely nice, because it was easy to get a job teaching way back in 1967 because they started off the Leaving Cert course in the vocational schools and all that. I liked Drumkeerin. I settled down there. Irene and I got married in 1971 and we had 5 children. And I suppose that's the start of it all. My life there, I got involved in everything nearly going in Drumkeerin itself, working with development and GAA, drama, credit union. There was nothing I wasn't involved in. I wouldn't have done it if only for Irene was accommodating and encouraging me to do it as well.
There's no doubt you got stuck in. Tell me a little bit about the plays then. When did the playwriting begin?
I wrote my first play. I had hoped to have it done in 1998. And you see, the French came through Drumkeerin in 1798 and they camped in Drumkeerin, and one character, Tom Gilheany was his name, he's folk hero. He's supposed to have met the French around Cologne or someplace, and he went with them to Bandamuk, and he escaped back from it. He came back alive, but his story is a great story, a heroic story. So I sort of took him as my central character, and I took the play back in time, that way. I even put some French into it. That was the start of it. And then when I retired from teaching, I saw the little article in the Leitrim Observer that Smashing Times Theatre Company in Dublin were looking for people to do the certificate course in community drama. I applied for it and I got on it. I was the grandfather on the course, I'd say, literally and metaphorically, and actually I was that because I had retired from teaching at that stage. There were 20 on it. It was outreach in Northern Ireland, and I would say it was maybe 50-50 Catholic, Protestant. I'm not too sure. We never discussed the religion. But I have to say they were the best 2 years, two of the best years of my life, because I really enjoyed it. We started on a Friday evening at 7 o'clock, and we finished on Sunday at 3. It was residential. It was paid for peace and reconciliation. It was once a month, 150 hours. So I ended up with a first class honours in that, and I started doing youth drama workshops in Drumkeerin with the youth. Probably the most satisfactory thing ever I did, because I saw young people losing their inhibitions, growing in confidence, growing in self-esteem, and at the start very, very timid, but when we finished we would all be on stage because we took issues that was going at the time on drugs and drink and bullying, and we devised scripts that I wrote, and we put on 3 plays at the end of each year, and it was one of the most satisfactory things I've done.
Isn't that great? And it just shows you're never too old for education.
I suppose the way I look at it is I was always involved with youth. I did 38 years with football with youth in Drumkeerin, in the Lochalan College, in the club, and with the national school. I was coaching teams and involved with them, so that's what kept me young.
And your book launch is coming up next weekend, the 26th and the 27th. Can you tell us a little bit about the stories that I'll find when I finally get my hands on the book?
Well, there are 16 stories, and there are 226 pages in the book. There's 3 or 4 of them, 4 probably, set in Fenagh, maybe more, 5. There is one in Drumkeerin, and others, you could put them universal, that would be maybe London, or you could put them any place, cite them any place. I started off with my Wheel of Life. The person who advised me to do that, the mentor, was Brian Layden, who helped me to organise the story. So Brian encouraged me and advised me to show myself, my character. So I wrote first my Wheel of Life, and in that it takes me all the places from Fenagh, as I said before, to Longford, to Galway, to London, to Cork, and back to Drumkeerin, and I suppose back to Fenagh when I was directing a play there. So that's my Wheel of Life and all my fortunes and misfortunes within that.
A good honest account.
It is, to be honest with you, I will probably too brave. People will know too much about me, but I'm not worried about that now at this stage. The family, they'll be tolerant. Yeah, so that's the first. And the second one is a story of Forked Lightning. And I suppose in it really captures the spirit of the times. It's about a workaholic who had a job for every Sunday of his life, and his wife was sick of that, and it ended up anyway that he found out that he had no job lined up for one Sunday. He was to sharpen the blades of his mowing machine, but he discovered that they were broken. One of his sons had broken them. But he had fallen out with his 6 sons because he was, I suppose, very, very, very slow to change farming methods and all that, and they wanted to change, and he had fallen out with the 6. Himself and the wife were there. She was very lonely, and life was going along like that, but suddenly there came a change. I don't want to tell the whole story but there came a change anyway, and it's a happy story. It ends up very happy. One of the things that was in my mind very much when I was writing that story was, I've seen, and I've seen it in my father and mother, I suppose, too. You never saw much expression of physical love or hugging or anything like that, but deep down there was a great affection with older people that they never saw, especially farming and things like that, you know. And that comes out in the book. It comes out in the book. That love that's there, it's never shown, but it's there between a husband and wife, you know. And you would never think it, you know. When you be a young fella years ago, you didn't see them going around sitting on their knees or hugging one another onto that. But that was one of the things that was in. I was very ill when I was 11. So the next story is go for the doctor and the priest. And my sister had to cycle to Mull to get a doctor, and she had to go cycle down to round back, come back to Foxfield to get the priest. And that's the story. It's the story in itself. And the reason I wrote it was, there was a couple of things in that, is that the priest and the doctor, they had such power at that time, you know. And people were afraid to challenge them enough, but she had to challenge them because she was so concerned. And I also took in a bit about the Fenagh, which is a story in itself later on. The person nowadays with their laptop and their phones and all that would not be able to comprehend that the only way we could make contact with a doctor that time was to cycle 10 miles and do that. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring that in there. And of course the determination to do that, you know, like come out in the story. And it has a happy ending. I'm here still, thank God. And the story following that is called Roosters, Cocks, Thieves and Queer Fellas. Now, roosters and cocks, there's a similarity in those two. Thieves and queer fellas, I suppose there is, but in all the ways around you, reader will discover that the roosters, cocks, thieves and queer fellas were all the one. It's a story. It's about childhood innocence. It's about the taboo that was sex at the time. It's a young fella's story about sex. It's about turkeys. And that time, they brought a turkey to we call it the rooster, or the turkey cock, or the queer fellow, or the thief. And they brought the turkey there, but it was put in a box or into something, and you might see the tail. There was a secrecy about it all. And then this young fella, he got to know too much and he got involved in it, and he felt guilty and afraid and everything of the priests and all that. It's a story, that's the story. It's possibly the best story in the book. It's very funny, full of life. There's one called The Station, you know, the old stations. There's one called My Mother, the Bone Setter. My mother was a bone setter. I've seen hundreds come into our house. And it was at a time when there was no orthopedics or anything in hospitals. And the bone setter filled a very important role in society. And I write that as it starts off with my mother. It's a fiction. I write fiction, and I do an actual diagnosis, and then I go on from that to the actual setting, and the ones coming back, and all those entailed with that. So people would like the story. I've written one. It's called The Challenge. It's based on a story I heard about a match between Mull and Fenagh. And now, of course, the characters are all fictional, but the story is based on a story I heard. People will enjoy it. It is very funny. It captures the time because it's in the 50s, and it captures what people would do to play Gaelic football at that time, cycling on their bicycles. And for the Mull crowd to come to Fenagh to play the match, they had to cycle. Some of them went to the carrier of bicycles. There was two on nearly every bicycle, but there was one car, and it brought a crowd of them, you know. It's a good story. And like all stories I've written, there is a very, very positive, happy ending to it. The strife ends on the field, and the relationships start, you know, the good relationships. It's all the stories. I think that's one thing I was very conscious of, that there should be reconciliation no matter where there was strife, you know. I like that in plays as well. I don't like plays that end tragically and sorrowfully. One of them is called Sacred Roots in the Heart, set in London, and it ends up in Ireland.
Inspired by your London days?
I mean, London days, it's about down and out. We all know about the people who are successful. We don't know much about the people who are down and outs. He's rescued, and he finds Ireland back again. That story, there's a long story in why he's there. The other story then, which is part 2 of that story, is Thou Shalt Not Commit Adultery.
Yes, I actually read about this one. Was it mentioned in the paper
this week? It's mentioned. There's an extract from it, and a blurb on the back of it there. This woman never thought she'd see him back. He was forced out of his home because his wife left him, and that was an awful thing that time. It was bringing scandal not only to himself but to his parish, and he was maligned from the altar, you know, but he came back. I have one, something found, something lost. It's quite a personal story, I suppose. I had a very, very precious object that my mother gave me. It was, as a matter of fact, it was a small little Sacred Heart picture card. And when I was in university, I wasn't getting on that well, so I think she rescued me with that. And I gave you the story about the story. You'll find the story that's got on there. I write one back to school. I take 4 of us back to Manny National School, where we went to school. I had an outstanding teacher, Master Rillans. He was an outstanding, he was my inspiration, I suppose. So I had to go back there. He had a remarkable store of folklore. We really, really lived the folklore he told us, so I wanted to recapture that as well. Oh, I write one in Drumkeerin. It's called The Immigrant. I meet him on the mountain, and he grew up in the 1930s, Drumkeerin, and he's back, he's 90-something. I think it's one of the nicest stories I've written in my life. So that's most of the stories that are in it. But I know one thing anyway, once people get the stories, they will enjoy them. They will, because my daughter-in-law edited the book for me. That photograph you saw maybe, or the picture on there, that's my home place, looking down on the lake. And from time to time I do a bit of landscape painting.
Don't tell me you're a painter as well.
Well, sometimes.
Jack of all trades, Andy.
Well, I suppose you could say that, maybe master of none of them, wouldn't matter.
I wouldn't agree.
I painted my home place, the other side of the lake from the road. I got a lovely picture, a photograph of it, and a painting for my brother in London. And he has that picture up in London. I'm very lucky. I suppose one of the things about me was I was always dabbling in writing. And I started off writing scripts for the novelty acts for the GAA. The ICA was very strong in Drumkeerin around the 70s, 80s, Irish Country Women's Association. They had competitions, so I used to write the script for them and direct them on the stage. I don't think I was supposed to be. I think at that time you had to be ICA to do that, but I did it for them anyway. And I got into the writing there, and I suppose that's one of the reasons I still do it. I'm hoping to do maybe a more detailed thing of the calendar year on the farm, involving my father, the whole family, ourselves, because children were workforce when I was young. One of my stories is the Guggerer, Guggerer, and it'll bring life back for many people in Ireland. Leitrim and Longford, mostly, because that was it. The Guggerer setting potatoes. He wasn't doing the setting. A woman or a man did the setting with his steeving, and the young person did the Guggering. So I dramatised that because I bring back, I meet someone in Ballinamore, and I think I capture life in Ballinamore as well.
Do you know what I'm really looking forward to this book for? This is going to appeal to people of all ages, because for people who, let's say, would have grown up in 1950s Ireland, it's going to be a step back in time for them and they're going to reminisce. But then for the likes of me who wasn't raised in 1950s Ireland, I'll actually get an insight into what it was like.
Well, my daughter-in-law edited the book, and she said to me last night, she says, "What are you charging for that book?" And I said, €10. Because I don't want to make money on a book. I want to show life as it was and bring people back to that. And I also want to show it to my grandchildren and people nowadays. So my daughter-in-law said to me, she said, "I think it should be 15. She said, "I really enjoyed it." And she's just in 40 or the early 40s,
Yes,
and she said to me it was a huge insight into life as it was on rural Ireland in the 1940s, 50s, early 60s.
What you've done is absolutely amazing. Gotten a snapshot of County Leitrim and Longford in that time, so hats off to you.
Thanks. I'm very lucky in the 2 people that were launching it, because Father Tommy Greenan, he's a priest in Fenagh, and Father Tommy was a very good Leitrim player, and he did at least 50 years on the missions in Africa. He's hale and hearty, and I had the good fortune to play with him, with Fenagh. I think he was centre half back when we played in the championship in 1960, and I was right half back, and we were good friends, so I'm very fortunate to get him. He's a great man. And in Drumkeerin, for the Drumkeerin launch, I've got Seán Breffni Flynn. He's called Breffni Flynn. I throw that in because he has a big firm in Dublin, Breffni Plant Hire. He's one of the most generous people ever walked, especially to Leitrim causes and to Drumkeerin causes and Leitrim GAA causes. So I felt I'd be honoured to have those 2 men, Tommy Greenan, Father Tommy, and Seán Flynn.
And the book launch, Andy, next Saturday the 26th in Fenagh at 8 o'clock, am I right?
Yes, Saturday, and the 26th at 8 o'clock, and in Drumkeerin on the Sunday afternoon at 2:30. The timing was mostly to accommodate people travelling, so, and especially the bank holiday weekend.
May I wish you the very best of luck with it. I can't wait to get my hands on the book. Thanks a million, Andy.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me.
There you have him, the gentleman that is Andy Redican. As you heard there, Andy's book will be launched in Fenagh Community Centre next Saturday, the 26th of October at 8 in the evening. Father Tommy Greenan will be at hand to launch the book. Also the day after then, next Sunday, the 27th of October, the book will be launched again at 2:30 in the afternoon in Drumkeerin Community Centre, and that will be launched by Seán Breffni Flynn. I, for one, am hugely looking forward to getting my hands on a copy of the book. Just a side note from us here at Leitrim Daily, you can now follow us on social media to keep in the loop with all things happening inside the county. All you have to do is search Leitrim Daily on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or even YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel now, and it has the daily podcasts put up there as well. We'd love to hear from you through them to help us keep creating great content. Just find us through our social media, leave us a comment, let us know exactly what Leitrim artists you think should feature on Kiss My Arts. Coming up in the next 2 weeks on the show, we will be taking in-depth looks into 2 great North Leitrim arts venues. We'll be talking to Brendan Murray, director at the Glens Centre in Manorhamilton, and also in store in the next while is a trip to the Ballroom of Romance in Glenfarne. We'll be chatting to Niall Speak all about the venue there. Of course, as I said, if anything pops into your mind, or if you know of a great artist who definitely has to be on the show, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. I've been Órla McNabola. This has been episode number 108 of Leitrim Daily, Kiss My Arts, with none other than Mr. Andy Redican. Go dtí go gaspar le chéile sin a rís, slán agus beannacht.